Good morning, everyone out there in CDISC land. This is Bernard with our latest webinar. This is a pretty exciting webinar because we have partnered with our friends over at PHUSE to put together all of this material. So without further ado, because we've got quite a bit to get through, I'm going to go ahead and get moving through our housekeeping, and then I'll introduce our presenters. And then after we do the feature presentations, we've got kind of two sections to it. We will have a Q&A session, so please feel free to submit questions at any time during the whole webinar. I will keep an eye on them, and then after that, we'll just kind of go over some upcoming learning opportunities and resources. So in terms of housekeeping, you, the audience, will remain on mute for the entirety of the call. That's just to kind of keep things calm and quiet. We will have a Q&A session after the presentations are done. If during the webinar you have any audio issues, if it starts to stutter or if it just cuts out altogether, the first best step to try to deal with that is really just to close out your GoToWebinar app entirely and then restart it, log back in. That tends to jostle loose whatever issues are causing the audio problems. And then if it continues to be a problem, look at your GoToWebinar tool panel and look at the audio bar. And if you're logged in listening to computer audio, you should have three little bars that kind of indicate your local connection. If those bars are yellow or red, that means that your local connection is maybe a little stuttery. I know mine at home is sometimes not the most reliable, so that may be the problem. But if you continue to have audio issues, just shoot me a question and I will do what I can to help out. The slides and from the presentation and a recording of this webinar are going to be made available on the CDISC website in the members only section. So if you want to check that out, you can go log in there. And then a quick content disclaimer. The purpose of this webinar is to provide examples of implementation and should not be considered official recommendations by CDISC unless otherwise stated in the presentation. And this webinar is not an authorized CDISC course, is not developed or delivered under CDISC operating procedures, and should not replace a published standard. Please refer to the latest published standards for the most authoritative implementation information. By saying that 3 times fast. Now on to our presenters. So we've got a bunch of awesome presenters today. For some reason, I decided I was going to put them in alphabetical order by their first names. Our first presenter is Atia Zaidi. She's the Director of Statistical Programming at Gilead. She has over 20 years of experience working with SAS and as a statistical programmer in companies such as Wyeth Ayerst, Covance, and Novo Nordisk, and for a variety of therapeutic areas. Atia is currently a Director of Statistical Programming at Gilead Sciences in the inflammation and respiratory therapeutic area. She also serves as the lead of Gilead's internal ADaM standards working group. Next up, we've got Beata Heinz, who sent me her bio just a moment ago, and I foolishly neglected to add it into the presentation. My apologies. So I'm going to pull that up real quickly. While I'm doing that, I will introduce Bhavin. So Bhavin Busa, he's a thought leader in the areas of data standards, programming, and regulatory submissions. And he is responsible for overseeing the group at VDS, that's Vita Data Sciences. He is very passionate about leveraging standards and technology to expedite data, review, analysis, and submission processes. And along that line, he devotes a lot of his time outside of his day job to volunteer with PHUSE and CDISC. In addition to co-leading this project, he is also a steering committee member at PHUSE and is currently working or leading a work stream, the Automate and Execute, within the CDISC 360 project. Now, going back to Beata. So Beata has been engaged with PHUSE from the very beginning in various roles, including chairing SDEs, conference streams, and leading projects. And then in her work life, she is with Main Analytics, which is a brand new, well, I say brand new, a newly founded German CRO heading up the statistical programming and biostatistics group. So, and then returning to my presentation so y'all can see what I'm looking at again. That is not what you wanted to see. There we go. Returning now onto one of our own CDISC folks. Kit Howard has 35 years of experience in many areas of clinical research, including developing data and process standards for exploratory through post-marketing clinical trials. She's been with CDISC for 6 years and is a Senior Director of Standards Development and Education for CDISC. She co-leads our medical device standards team and is a CDISC authorized instructor for CDASH, SDTM, SDTM for medical devices, and CDISC for newcomers. And then last but not least, another of our CDISC folks, we've got Rebecca Baker, who's our standards developer, and she has over 20 years of experience in the healthcare industry, ranging from nurse clinician, quality improvement, and clinical research to informatics. And prior to joining CDISC, she was involved in standards development representing health informatics for Clinical Society. She joined CDISC in February of 2019 and is currently working on Crohn's, diabetes, and heart failure standard development projects. She holds a Master's of Science in Health Informatics and a Master of Healthcare Administration. So now that we've gotten the introductions and everything out of the way, Kit, I'm going to go ahead and hand control over to you so we can get started with the feature presentation. The control is coming your way right now.
Okay. And one of the most common phrases we utter these days, can you see my screen?
Is my audio working? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
We're looking at your desktop.
Oh, okay. Momentarily, you should be looking at, good. Okay. So welcome everybody to the first section of this presentation, the CDISC Implementation Primer, one of CDISC's close collaborations with PHUSE. And I'm going to hand the audio over to Beata to start. And Beata, if you just say, obviously next slide or whatever, I will do my best to hit the button.
Thank you so much, Kit, for the nice introduction, and also Bernard, thanks for being flexible and agile with my CV. So yeah, welcome everybody, and it's our great pleasure to let people know about where we are with the CDISC Implementation Primer project, which is, as Kit said, a collaboration project between PHUSE and CDISC, targeted to new implementers of CDISC. I'm going, next slide, please, Kit. So I'm going to talk about the introduction and background of the project, our targets and the status, while then Kit and Rebecca will talk more about the content on what we developed in terms of the primer topics, which we will look at in a little while. As Bernard said, there will be the option for Q&A throughout the session through the chat, and then we will answer your questions at the end. Next slide, please, Kit. Yeah, so there was, and this is a while ago, but I think that's true since we've all first heard of CDISC, and I very well recall my first CDISC official training, and I didn't know where to start and what to do. And I think that's also what we saw that and heard from people when they knew and overwhelmed with what's out there, not knowing what's relevant to me, where should I start? And there were things that were heard, like the implementation is complex. There is so much information out there. I don't know where to look and where to start. And also people got confused about all the compliance discussions and what's relevant and where is all the information hidden. So newcomers usually are overwhelmed by the amount of information received and struggling how to get started there. Next slide, please. And this is then when we then took the action. The concerns were heard and taken seriously, And this is also what the PHUSE CSS conference actually is about. It's about kind of getting aware of implementation issues, room for improvement within the industry, how you can facilitate people's daily work, also the review of the regulators in the drug approval process. And this is actually what happened, that the concerns were heard. Some people took the action and launched a project at the PHUSE Computational Science Symposium in 2018 in Silver Spring. And it got launched as a part of the working group optimizing the use of data standards, obviously. And people were really keen to get it going and help their colleagues when they get started with CDISC. Over the time, we had, I think it were quite above 20 volunteers from various stakeholders. And this is actually also so important that it's not just kind of pharma guys or universities. So we were a broad variety of people, and it turned out to be really a CDISC PHUSE collaboration project. And we had some changes in the leads, but for the last time, we had leads from CDISC, who was Bess Leroy. Then it was Yvonne Moores and myself from PHUSE, and Wendy helping from the PHUSE office to facilitate our work. And it really turned out to be real teamwork. And it really, we had, well, we also had a lot of fun, but we also had great achievements. So what we did, we wanted to give people and provide a starting point as an implementation guidance to people which are new to CDISC, and the target audiences were actually data producers like data managers, statistical programmers, statisticians, but also those using the data. Again, it can be statisticians, but also medical people, and then also people from academia and actually medical writers or people just using the data. These were our target groups. Then in the initial phase of the project, we sat together and we identified the core topics of interest. And that's what Kit and Rebecca are going to talk about in a minute. And it was clearly the target not to produce any new documents, but rather to help people with visualization of data flows and helping them in kind of giving more guidance, which is easy to understand and helps them in their daily work. Next one, please. So, and also one of the clear goals, as this is also the principle we were following, is that any material deliverables the project would produce would be freely available to the public. So being published on CDISC and PHUSE side websites. So the topics we identified was how to get started with CDISC. That's pretty clear and obvious. Then we also thought we need to look at how the CDISC standards are linked together. What the whole topic of traceability means in daily work, and how you can make sure you have it traceable in the end. And then the fourth topic, as I mentioned before, was compliance. In the course of the project, of course, it's voluntary work. It's on top of your working obligations. So we did not manage to look into the linkage of models, but on the other three, we worked intensively and also produced material that's now ready for publication. And I need to say it was intense. We had a lot of meetings, and between meetings work, people were really committed to their deliverables and keen to get them out to the public to help their colleagues. And so now we have the material ready to go to the public. Yeah, and I need to say I enjoyed it very, very much. And I can now hand over to Kit and Rebecca, who will talk about the contents of the topics we were working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Beate. That was a great foundation for what both Rebecca and I are going to talk about. So the first topic that Beate mentioned of the 4 was getting started with CDISC, and trying to work out what that looked like to help people get started with CDISC, I think, was almost as much of a challenge as getting started with CDISC is. There's obviously a tremendous number of moving parts, and trying to tease out what the best paths into this world are was something of a challenge. So we ended up with a number of different products, some of which are, as Beate put it, ready for publication, some of which are in their final stages of preparation. And we decided within this to, we ended up deciding we needed to produce a little material. We had originally in the project thought that, you know, everything that we need should be out there, and all we should have to do is link to it. Well, it turned out that that was a little, shall we say, optimistic. So we have had to develop some things, but that said, there is still the primer area still will be a hub for finding a lot of what's already there. So sort of 3 main categories of things, if you will. We produced a series of introductions to the various standards. These are videos, and they are sort of in a couple of different topic areas. As you can see from the list, some of them are introductions to some of the individual standards, and we'll have, eventually we expect to have one for all of the foundational standards. So define isn't listed here, but we expect to get that in there. Plus, we have one on the overall regulatory requirements world. This is looking at it from the point of view of, you know, that CDISC standards can be used for regulatory submissions, and more or less what that looks like, and how it's different around the world. And then an overview of SDTM and SDTM concepts, which is sort of an umbrella for an awful lot of other things that we do. And then over time, I expect that we will add to these, but this, we hope, forms a good core of what will be helpful for people. All of these are 3 to 6 minute videos. They are all being produced at this point on as cartoon videos. So any of you who have ever seen the Vyond or Go Animate type cartoons with the little characters of the business people wandering around and talking, you'll have some idea of what this might look like. And later, toward the end of the presentation, Rebecca will demonstrate one, will show one. So you'll get a sense of what's to come. Then there's a little bit of an introduction to CDISC as an organization. CDISC for Newcomers is a presentation we currently have in various levels of detail that presents an overview of what we do and a little bit about the organization itself. And then we have a couple of what will probably be videos of what does CDISC mean to different roles. So if you're a data manager, what do CDISC standards do for you? You know, why should you care, in other words? And then we did manage to find the standards relationships piece. We didn't produce anything for it, so it didn't really rise on the on the collaboration team's radar. But in the latest launch of the CDISC website redesign, which was at the end of last month or early this month, it doesn't look very different to the average user, but one of the things that did get put up there was the relationship between models and standards. So for each standard, we see what model belongs to what standard, and I think I have a slide of that in a little bit. And then traceability, which was a very coherent, comprehensive slide deck produced by some of the folks who volunteer primarily with PHUSE, and that is in its final stages to go for recording, and that'll be mostly a voiceover PowerPoint, which is what most of us are used to. Whoops, moving along too quickly here. So these are some of the topics that we have online for getting started with CDISC with SDTM and the IG. You'll see some, I'm going to play with one of my toys, so it's not your screen going crazy. You'll see some videos here that we will have produced. Some of these are ready already. Description of how SDTM plays out in the TAUGs. We'll have a link to the CDISC library. We're going to do something a little bit more with compliance. We talked about the traceability and the regulatory requirements. We're going to point to the page that has the active teams with the team charters on them. Conformance rules will be links. Each of the standards either already has published or will shortly be publishing conformance rules. I tell you whether or not you're conforming with at least programmable conformance rules. Not all of them, unfortunately, are programmable. At some point, we'll come out with the development principles, which basically say what are the overarching principles that we use as we are, well, it's hard. I'm trying to think of a definition of this that doesn't use the words themselves. They're principles we use for development, you know. And then what you're going to hear a bit more about later on in the presentation today is the PHUSE SDTM FAQ project. So we'll link to that as well. So just to give you a moment's preview into what these cartoons might look like, or this one actually does look like, this one's already produced. So what are SDTM and SDTM concepts? So there's our person and the general observation classes along with special purpose and some examples of each. Long gone are the days when we can list all of the domains that belong to each of these general observation classes. So we choose a subset of them. And then this particular cartoon talks a bit about the variables. There are different types of variables, what kinds of things go into it. So this is the look and feel of the cartoons that are being produced and the level of information that we're giving, trying to make it high level enough that people who really don't know anything can get a sense of it, but with enough detail in it that people who need to use it, you know, can get enough to get a sense of where they need to go next. This is the a screenshot of the linkage among versions. So this is what implementation guide belongs to what model version. Hopefully that's a little bit easier to see. So SDTM version 1.8 has been published and it corresponds to the animal rule implementation guide. 1.7 corresponds to SDTM 3.3 and medical devices. And shortly we should see published whatever shortly means. And once we've sorted through all of the public review comments, we should see SDTM version 2.0 along with SDTM IG version 3.4. This, if you notice up here, this set of tabs exists on each of the standards pages, and on each one of them, you can see the versions tab, and it will show you this kind of chart. And of course, each one of these is linked to the document itself. Couple of other things to pay attention to here. Education, so you can learn more about it. And then the knowledge base, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. So we can get past that. Traceability. The traceability slide deck takes both ADaM and SDTM traceability and talks about what does the concept of traceability mean from a practical point of view in each of these environments. And then it also talks about how you get the traceability between the two. So that one is a regular presentation that we'll go ahead and get recorded, and we will post that up, and that'll be linked to. So two separate sets of traceability, which are then linked together. Okay, what does it mean to be CDISC compliant? There is information out there, things like the conformance rules and, well, the implementation guides themselves. Within CDISC and PHUSE, we decided to put this one down deferred because partly it's a bit of a challenge to work out what to cover around compliance when several different parties have rules around what they mean, what they think compliance means, and what compliance means to them. And we need to sort out how to present that so that we give a fair and clear picture of who is what or what is whom. Okay, bonus topic, CDISC knowledge base. There is a space in the new CDISC website for the knowledge base. If you look to the top of the page, you'll see resources, and you will see under resources a link that you can hit for knowledge base. And knowledge base is a compendium, an ever-growing compendium of articles, examples, and hopefully soon there will be also write-ups of known issues. So things that we know are problems. A lot of you who have looked at the therapeutic area user guides will have some familiarity with those. These are the current article topics, short history of CDISC, and all of these are up there, by the way. I just bolded some because it's easier to see something than everything in a sea of blue the same color. Changing event severities, so various ways you might collect, say, adverse events as their severities change. Not that we're advocating one versus another, we're simply showing you several ways to represent that within the CDISC standards, depending upon what your needs are. Domains, how do you decide what should go into a new domain? And then timing, which is all of our favorite topic, of course. And I encourage you to go and browse through these. They are accessible, well-written, and extremely useful. Their purpose is to be absolutely practical. The examples, when they come out, the examples that are out exist both for CDASH and for SDTM. You'll see a square that looks like that on the page. You can hit read more or click on the top, and it will take you to an example CRF for that, which is designed to help you translate the data dictionaries into a visual. And then additionally, you can hit ones for SDTM. This particular one is glomerular, I hate that word, filtration rate. And when you click into it, it will show you contents. In this case, we have 3 example data sets that show you what you need to have in order to represent these data, and then the layout of the data set itself. There are limited examples right now, and that's because we're curating these very carefully, pulling them in from the tags and from the implementation guides, but we want to be sure they're really good, high quality, and useful. And with that, I will hand it over to Rebecca.
Hello, and thank you, Kit, for that wonderful overview. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
So I will be giving you, hello everyone, and good morning and good afternoon. I will be giving you the newcomer's perspective. I was the token guinea pig giving feedback on the teased out content. I'll first give you a little bit about my journey and how it was to be a newcomer. Then I'll talk about the problem and the solution. And I appreciated that Beata recalled her first look at the CDISC standards. So next slide, please. All right, so my journey. I've been in healthcare for many years, and about half of that was with clinical research, and about a quarter of that was involved with healthcare standards. Now to break that down a little bit, in nursing, I spent time in the intensive care unit. Go back, please. Well, that's fine. And I was in the cath lab doing procedures. I did quality improvement where I built and helped maintain a heart attack database. I did clinical research where we did phase 2, phase 3, and investigator-initiated trials where we wrote our own protocols and did our own stats and Thankfully, we had a biostatistician on our team, and I really could have used the CDISC standards at that point. And then I was at a professional medical society where I served on the informatics task force. We actually participated in the IHE, or the Integrating Healthcare Enterprise, where we did structure reporting and we mapped a cath lab procedure note to the HL7 clinical documentation architecture. And I also participated in HL7 work groups, Health Level 7 clinical information modeling initiative, the CIMI group, and the clinical decision support group. And I tell you all this just to help you realize that I was not new to this space. Next slide, please.
There seems to be a bit of a delay. So.
Yes, beautiful. So when I came to CDISC, I was like, well, where do I start? There's a lot of information here. And at the time, it was in alphabetical order. So I started with the ADaM model. Now, I've always been fond of stats. However, if reading the ADaM model is rather dry. So I asked my colleague, Bess Leroy, where should I start? And she directed me to the SDTM model, and that follows more the clinical research process. So that was much easier to consume. Next slide. So I see the primer as a bridge from these introductory videos on the CDISC website that direct you by your role in research. Next slide. And each video here is tailored to your area, and it helps you to get your feet wet into the CDISC role. Now, the primer videos, they're short, and I try to emphasize that as we were reviewing them, and to direct you from here to the standards and all the documents and provide a bridge for where to go for the information that you need to do your work, whatever your role. Now, the primer provides a connection between the standard and the robust education program, whether it's the online modules that you would be doing or the in-person classroom setting, and helps you to immerse yourself and absorb the content that you need for your role. Next slide. So the problem, where to start as you start your CDISC journey. Next slide. The solution, where to start the CDISC primer with collaboration with PHUSE. And to conclude, as the token guinea pig, I would like to share 3 final thoughts of what I learned participating on the team. And first was the relationship between SDTM and SEND-IG. I, for some reason, thought there was a SEND model, but as you saw, what Kit showed you, that it's actually SDTM. And understanding the relationship between the models and the IGs and how they all work together to complement each other. And then lastly, learning about PHUSE and discovering all the handy one-pagers that are helpful for implementation on their website. So the CDISC PHUSE primer will serve the community well. Thank you. And now Bernard's going to show the video.
Bernard, I assume you can grab control. Oh, there we go. Oh my goodness, I don't think that's part of our video.
No, that is not. That was definitely GoToWebinar being a little wacky. So the video is forthcoming.
The Study Data Tabulation Model, or SDTM, is CDISC's foundational standard for formatting and organizing study data. SDTM defines a standard structure for study data tabulations and is evolving as the global standard for submitting data to regulatory authorities. However, the use of SDTM standards is also spreading into academic research use cases. In general, a data model represents a real-world situation about which a database of collected data can be structured. In our case, the data model represents a trial or research study. The model organizes elements of data and standardizes how these elements relate to one another and includes properties of the real-world entities. It is important to understand that the SDTM is the overarching model from which multiple implementations are based. For example, the non-clinical SEND IG, the clinical SDTM IG, and the medical device and various therapeutic area guides. The SDTM model defines the structure for all trial or research data, regardless of how it was collected. SDTM groups data according to what we call general observation classes. An observation class is a high-level grouping loosely based on the topic being represented by the data. SDTM has 3 general observation classes: interventions, events, and findings. These observation classes are defined in the model by the set of variables available within each that are used to represent the data around the concepts inherent to that class. Most data can fit into one of these 3 classes. In addition to the 3 general observation classes, there are other special purpose datasets with specific standardized structures for representing additional information that would not otherwise fit into the general observation classes. In the video Intro to SDTM Implementation Guide for Human Clinical Trials, or the video Intro to SEND Implementation Guide for Animal Research Studies, you'll learn how these observation classes are further broken down into domains, which are logical groupings of data organized around a particular topic. You will notice that variables in the SDTM all begin with --. These dashes are placeholders for the 2-letter domain code in the SDTM IG. Variables in SDTM can be broken into the following 4 types: identifiers, topic variables, qualifiers, and timing variables. Identifiers indicate the subject, the domain, the record sequence, and other identifying information. Topic variables contain the focus of the observation. Therefore, these variables are the primary difference in what separates the individual observation classes. Qualifiers serve various purposes in providing additional information about the topic. They can be used to qualify the other variables within the record, such as the results or the topic, or they can qualify the entire record. Timing variables are used to describe various aspects of the timing of the observation. See the SDTM-based implementation guides for more information and examples of these variable types. It is important to remember that the SDTM and SDTM IG work together. In the videos Intro to SDTM IG or Intro to SEND, you will learn more about tabulating data in domains based on the observation classes defined in the SDTM.
All right, excellent. That was a great video. So, thank you to Kit and Beata and Rebecca for your section. That was really great. And so now, Bhavin, I'm going to go ahead and hand control over to you, sir, so y'all can take your section of the presentation. Control is coming to you right now.
Sure. I'm going to show monitor 1. Let's see. Are you guys able to see the PowerPoint?
Yep, we're looking at it right now.
Awesome. I'm going to go in the slideshow. There you go. All right. You see the full slide, Bernard?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Bernard, for helping with the coordination on this. I really want to thank everyone behind the scene as well who made this event happen. And I know personally I'm involved, as Bernard introduced, personally involved in both the organization PHUSE and CDISC. And I know both the organization work really hard to make sure that there's this kind of collaboration project across both the organization, and then we could avoid the duplication of work. So that's great. Really, really thankful to everyone again behind the scene who made this happen. Good morning, afternoon, everyone. My name is Bhavin Busa. Hope you and your loved ones are safe and healthy. As you could see, this will be more of a lively discussion between me and Atya. Amy Palmer couldn't join. She represents CDISC. She couldn't join this session today, but it's going to be Arta and myself going over some of the slides and show you guys what this project team has done. So, just to give you a background, this is an ongoing project since 2016 with very active participation from subject matter experts in the industry, from CDISC and the FDA. The idea, as I said, the idea for today's webinar is to introduce the project and to let everyone know there is such forum and promote participation, right? Going to the next slide. So in the past, annual conferences, the CDISC standards implementers and consumers, they came together and discussed standards implementation nuances. In these sessions, it was obvious that the industry is facing various common challenges towards implementation, right? And then, they were all asking the same questions, but, people were getting different responses, right? So it was very obvious during those sessions back in 2016, discussed in these implementation nuances session, that there is a need for a forum and a subsequent knowledge base where one can go in and see what these questions are, and along with the responses, right, to address these commonly asked questions, right, frequently asked questions. And so this project team was put together. I'll go through the details in a minute. But I don't know if people know, but there was also a CDISC forum in the past. But of course, CDISC is into developing standards, as you saw from previous presentation. They're not as much into addressing questions from the industry on the implementation of these standards, right? And so, even for CDISC, this PHUSE forum was chosen as the preferred partner for implementation questions and issues. And you will see when we go through the participation, we have multiple people in this project from CDISC organization and multiple people from the industry who participate in building these standards, right? So you will see this project team was formed together back in 2016. We in fact are going through our 4th year anniversary, where we have project team members, from CDISC, from FDA, and also industry subject matter experts. And as I said, the members who participate in developing the standards are helping address these implementation questions. We will go through some examples and we'll show you what are the questions that we have received, and then how the team sort of addresses these questions and where does these questions get published along with our responses. This team, again, it's part of the optimizing use of data standards working group. We meet every 2 weeks on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So as you could see from the diagram on the right, the idea behind this project is that the implementers and consumers will submit the questions to this project team, which consists of course, the PHUSE members, the CDISC members, representation from the FDAs. And this project team will review and develop responses to these questions and post it on Wiki. Of course, the idea is not to give very specific implementation responses, but more of what's frequently asked in the industry, right? And so this questions and the responses is now then available on PHUSE Wiki, which is publicly available. And for you guys to go through it, we have this links that we'll navigate to now. I'm going to go out of the presentation mode. And as you can see, we have various collaboration tools that we work as a project team, right? We're working on the PHUSE Wiki, and I'm going to show you guys where it is, right? These links will be available as part of the presentation, which will be shared by all the attendees here. We'll also go through the project teamworks site, which only is, again, it's only handled by the project team members. And then where do you go to submit questions, right? And this is the link that takes you to that form. And then where's that database? Where are the questions and the responses? This is available publicly. So I'm going to show you these links one by one real quick. So if you look at it, this is the PHUSE Wiki page. And if you just simply Google SDTM ADaM implementation FAQ, or just Google's SDTM ADaM FAQs, this page should come up, and then this will navigate you to this wiki page, which will tell you who are the project leadership team and who are the members. And in fact, Atya and I were discussing along with Amy about the participation. It's an amazing group of people that spreads across different sponsor companies, vendor companies. You also have people from the FDA going into it. We know we have team members across from Japan as well in this. There are about 100 plus members who have signed up for this project across 45 different organizations. So we have an amazing participation. Of course, during this bi-weekly call, we don't have 100 people dialing into it, but we do have access to these people to go to ask for their responses to the questions that we receive, right? And if I go to the next tab, and this also navigates you to sort of the responses and how to submit a question, but I'm going to go to this team workspace. As I said, this team workspace is restricted to members who are part of this project team. So since I have access to it, you can navigate to all the sort of different tabs to it. But at the same time, when you look at this is the messages. This is what the team uses to put the questions out there. So what happens is the project manager from PHUSE, once the question is received, for example, Wendy will post these questions onto the message board, and which will be then received by all the members in the team. I want to show you an example. If you look at it, these are all the questions that we've been receiving. I want to show you specific examples. For example, in this one, we received a question from one of the team members actually about creation of trial arms, trial element domain for observational studies. As you could see, this was tagged to about 115 people, and one of the team members responded with their response to whether whether a TA or T domains were generated in the observational study. We had Diane from CDISC also provide her responses. She's an expert in the trial design domain, and she also provided her response along with with someone like Lisa, who's also a subject matter expert, giving her perspective of we created a simple TATE to address this, right? And what happens with this? This is sort of a collaboration tool that we use as a team. And once we have a collated response, we put together the question and the responses into the PHUSE database, FAQ database, which I'll navigate to. So that's one example, right? And another example we've been discussing recently was about the adjudication data, right? And as you could see, this question came from Atya, and this was discussed in our organization, whether there are any plans for generation of EA domain in the future CDISC SDTM releases. And then she also mentioned about, for example, is there any suggestions to map this adjudication data into ADaM data sets? And of course, rightly so, Joanne, who's also a co-author to the white paper that was published, she responded. Even this question was discussed during our bi-weekly meeting, and then we put together a response. At the end, even Mike, who's also from CDISC, he provided an official response to this message saying, look, yes, the CDISC is working on it. The plan is to have this available as part of the future SDTM IG, not SDTM version 3.4, but that CDISC is working towards it. And this is, again, a very helpful information to have for someone like Atya to take it back to their organization. There's an official communication coming out from CDISC about that particular domain, right? And then what we do as a team is we put together, the question was received. Now we collate the responses that is now going to be published to PHUSE Wiki, where it's available for public, right? So I just wanted to show you the process about, how do we collaborate within our project team. So I do encourage, if you guys, of course, if you, as part of your organization, you could join this project team, so you get access to the questions that being received, and then also contribute towards creating a response to these questions, right? And if you are not able to join the project team, of course, there's this form that is available on the FHUSE wiki again, where you could submit your name, your email. The bunch of the questions we received, we wanted to categorize with these categories, whether data submission, legacy SDTM mapping, IG nuances, or trial design domain, and so on, right? So that we could find the right team members to address these questions, right? And then so you could select the categories and put the questions here, and the project manager at FHUSE will receive this, and then they will post it on our team workspace for team to address. Once everything is done, then we put together our responses along with questions and responses here. And as you could see, right, and this page is going to be quite long as we fill up more and more FAQs with the responses. But we also want to make sure when we provide a response that we put the date in there along with some of the references, because as much as we would like to provide a response, we also want to make sure that those are vetted and those are referenced correctly, so that we are not putting out there information that may be inaccurate or that could change over time, right? And that's why we want to make sure that there's a process in terms of putting the responses out there in the public. Okay, I'm going to go back to my presentation and go to next slide. And look, I'm not going to go through these examples, in detail, but if you could see everyone's favorite, there was a question that has been was provided to us, and we provided the response. How should other be represented for variables bound by non-extensible code list, right? It's a favorite question. We provided our response. What are the best practices for creating control terminology for questionnaire responses, right? We provided our response to that. And then, is there any guidance for custom domain to regulatory agency to submit to regulatory agencies? We discussed it and we provided our response. Not only we get questions about IG nuances, but also for submission related. In fact, a lot of questions we get from submission related because, as Atya and I would discuss, it's sort of the nature of the process, because you are creating these standards so that you could submit your data sets to the regulatory agency. So it's very obvious that not only people would have questions for the implementation of these standards, but also, okay, what do I do once I have these data sets ready, right? What are those, certain things when I need to take care of on the submission side? So as an example, we got a question about the BIMO data sets, about what goes in the miscellaneous folder. How do I submit a test submission to the FDA? These information could be out there in bits and pieces, right? Where you could find this information. But at the same time, we wanted to give this forum so that we could collate these responses, provide references, so one can go to this database to get the information. Right? Same with this trial design domain. Why are screen failures and not assigned not presented in trial arms, right? So we provided a response. How to define an unplanned element in SC domain, right? Example, unexpected washout. So those are the specific sort of frequently asked questions that we came across. And these are already published FAQs on the FHUSE wiki website. Okay, so that those are publicly available. And then, as Atya, please jump in here. But these are the examples of the current FAQs that we're getting, right? Just to put it out there, I know it's very wordy, but just to give you guys a perspective of, what are we addressing as a team? For example, this was about the lab, the SI unit versus the conventional unit. The PMDA submission requires you to submit SI units, while FDA could ask you to use the US conventional unit, right? How do you prepare the LB domain for global trials slotted for submission to both FDA and PMDA? This was an interesting question that we received from the implementer. We thought that this is really good, something that we should address as a team, and then put out some kind of guidance out there, right? So we are right now, as a team working on addressing this question. And then, even for split data sets, right? Somebody was asking a question. Does the split has to happen only because of the size, or could we actually create a split data set for sort of the ease of the review purpose, right? Illustrative purpose. For example, include FA and QS domains, like split them out even so that you could explain it better and review process goes even better, right? So that's a question that has not been addressed out there. It's not, there's no guidance around that. And we wanted to make sure that, look, this is a very valid question, and we will put responses that could be useful to the industry, right? Those are some of the couple examples. And Atya, I'm going to hand it over to you. But I think if you want to add anything to this, or you want me to go through the next slide.
Sure. No, the one thing that I just wanted to say about this particular slide was the fact that we are not just gearing for FDA submissions. The questions also come from a PMDA submission perspective. So that's why that first example is a really good one. Obviously everybody knows that the PMDA has some official guidances now, and they are accepting, as of April of 2020, electronic data submissions. And so this is a really relevant and good time for us to start discussing some of the differences between submissions that you do for FDA versus PMDA or even EMA. So, I mean, to me, this is a great collaborative platform and effort where we can all come together. We can discuss these in the forums that we have in a very safe space, in a safe manner, and we can have very genuine and honest discussions, and then look to see if we can provide further guidances that would be relevant to the rest of the industry and the rest of the organization. Next slide, please. Okay, and then I specifically wanted to talk about the white papers that we actually developed from this FAQ team. As you've seen from Bhavin's presentations, we tend to get questions where we can provide comprehensive answers to. And if you come and you look at our website and the published answers, you'll see that they're pretty comprehensive. They're about 1 to 2 paragraphs long. As Bhavin said, that we don't want to provide very, very specific instructions in those responses that we do. However, we want to give a general guidance. But these were 2 interesting questions that we received that we thought, there might not be a straightforward answer to them. So the first question that we received was, there is no guidance for submission of event adjudication data, which is very true. And so we pondered and pondered, and the result was that why don't we actually convert this into a white paper? And the first link, the hyperlink that's been provided, is actually the hyperlink to the best practices for submission of event adjudication data. The second question that we received was about what is the guidance for integration ISS-ISE submissions? Are both integrated SDTM and integrated ADaM databases needed? Again, the team kind of came together. We talked about it. We discussed that this was not going to be an easy answer, that we could kind of succinctly put into 1 or 2 paragraphs. And so we decided that we would embark on creating a white paper for it. The integration strategies in support of ISS and ISE submissions white paper is soon to be published. We've completed the public review of it, and then we are addressing some review comments that have been provided from the public review. Next slide, please. So you can see here the process that we kind of followed in terms of getting from the question to the decision of actually creating a white paper. So like I said, when we received the question, the FAQ team came together and we decided that it was the answer was going to be too complex to kind of put it into 1 or 2 paragraphs. So what we did is we internally decided that we would need a sub-team, 1 for each white paper, and then we identified who the co-leads were going to be for those sub-teams. In addition, we had a few volunteers who met on a regular basis to work on the initial drafts of each of the white papers. And then once the drafts were ready for a larger team review, then the drafts were provided to the FAQ team, which really consists of about 45 to 50 organizations, representation from CDISC, representation from FDA, and everybody provided their input and their review. Once we were happy with the sort of the final draft, if you will, then it went through the internal PHUSE process of a steering committee review, followed by a public review, and then work towards the finalization of the white paper. So approximately, this is just an estimate, but it took us about 10 to 12 months for these particular white papers to be either finally published or near publication. This is obviously a long time. And one of the things, one of the reasons that it takes such a long time is because, even as Beata mentioned, this is all a volunteer basis, right? So we are trying to commit our times in addition to the, normal work and activity that we do to try to see if we can kind of better the experiences of our colleagues across the industry. And so it does take a little bit to go back and forth, work through the drafts and then go through the processes that are implemented by PHUSE. But I do have to say that, I really enjoyed looking through the adjudicated event white paper, and then I was personally involved in the white paper for the ISS and ISC, so it's been quite a learning process for me. Next slide, please. Okay, so I don't want to bore you with going through the actual white papers themselves, but I just wanted to give you some of the highlights of what the white papers include. So here you can see that we had had some posters presentations in the PHUSE CSS and then in the PHUSE CSS for 2019. And so I just go through really quickly what each of the white paper kind of highlights. So the event adjudication white paper really tries to tackle the following questions. Can the same data structure be generalized across therapeutic areas? What level of detailed data should be submitted? Is it sufficient to submit only data points for the final outcome, or should individual adjudicators' assessments be submitted as well? How to present investigator-reported assessments and adjudicator assessments so that they are clearly differentiated and easily identifiable. What should be standard structure of data set to ensure traceability of events and ease of reviewer? And what data should be submitted in both SDTM and ADaM? Is there any conformance or validation that needs to be performed on the event adjudication SDTM data? So these are the types of questions that the event adjudication poster and the white paper were trying to solve. And within the white paper, once you have the chance to read it, it will go through some cases where you have two adjudicators and the adjudicators have come up with the consensus. Where you have two adjudicators, they do not have a consensus, and so there is a third adjudication consensus record that needs to be added in. And then the third scenario is if you need to do a re-adjudication, and how would you actually store each of these different types of scenarios into the actual SDTM domain. Next slide, please. So this poster was also presented at the PHUSE CSS, and this has to do with the ISS and ISC implementation strategy. And this particular white paper talks about the fact that, there currently isn't any standard to discuss how to do the implementation strategy of an ISS or an ISC. And while there are a variety of different scenarios that you can come across, this particular white paper is discussing ADaM-only integration, and then SDTM and ADaM integration. So it talks about essentially these two scenarios. And then the white paper will walk you through, how you go from taking your individual studies or multiple studies, if you have studies with SDTM or studies with legacy data, and then the process of how do you then generate an integrated ADaM-only, or first generate an integrated SDTM followed by an integrated ADaM. The white paper also will cover some tips that we found commonly being used across the different organizations about how to do upversioning of control terminology, harmonization of coding data, and then what to put and store into your define.xml or into the data reviewer's guide, geared towards integrated SDTM or integrated ADaM databases. And then finally, the white paper also talks about traceability and compliance considerations that you need to take into consideration for both of the scenarios. So like I said, having co-authored this particular white paper, it's really been a huge learning process for me. I've had the pleasure of working with so many different members of the FAQ team, and then the experience that they have kind of gained, not just from their current organizations, but even from their past experiences. And we've kind of brought that together, to kind of come up with a more cohesive white paper that hopefully will be helpful for anybody else who is going to be running into this situation.
Yeah, and Nadia, I mean, I just want to add here something about, I think it's just, when someone in the industry is want to get into, before they get into, working on an ISS and ISE, this is a great reference. As I think I've mentioned this to you in my organization, I've asked everyone to, put this as a reference before they start working on it, right? Along with this poster that gives you a visual representation of what are the different scenarios and what are the things that you have to look for in up versioning, harmonization, the examples that you guys have provided. That's simply amazing, right, for someone to start with. And along with that, now you have poster plus the white paper that gives you all the details. So now I really have to say great job by the team, because it provides provide a great reference on a very important topic of some integration, and also event education. As given that there's no specific domain that it goes to, right? There are people do different things in different ways. The reviewers may be okay with multiple approaches, but what we have given as a team is like, look, here's what we as an expert have done. Now this has worked for us. Go and you might want to use this as a starting point. So it's a great reference, and I think we've done a great job in the last couple of years, actually, not only for these white papers, but to also keep the participation going, right?
Absolutely. And I have to say, from a personal perspective, I'm relatively a newcomer to the FAQ team. I've really thoroughly enjoyed the interactions that I'm having with my colleagues across the organization. We really treat each other with respect. No question is a dumb question, as you can see that I am also asking those questions and posing them to the rest of my colleagues. And it's really interesting to see how the different organizations interpret or implement, rather, the standards that CDISC has been providing to us. So, that part of it has been quite a learning process for me as well. And so I think that, I would definitely echo what Bhavin has been saying, to encourage everybody not only to come and join us so that we can have a more collaborative effort and a more robust, conversation, but also to help us, and pose questions so that we know what it is, you're thinking about, what sort of challenges you're having in your organization, and perhaps other people have, maybe faced some similar challenges, and we can learn from each other. We can come up with perhaps a better solution than maybe you had thought was, even possible.
Yeah. And then I know we have submitted questions on behalf of the submitters to eData team, to FDA, and to other agencies, and to our teammates who are in Japan, for example, who are in Europe, for example, right? So just with this, I think as a closing remark, it's sort of, we feel this forum gives the industry an opportunity to discuss those questions and to submit those questions, right? Not only about the implementation nuances, but also about submission related, which sort of, which is critical, right? It may not directly be addressed by CDISC. As I said, CDISC is into developing standards. They are not into addressing questions about the implementation of these standards. And that's why we have very, very active participation from people who work at CDISC, and not only people who work at CDISC, but who actually participate in CDISC STS team, ADaM team, and submission team, CDISC 360 team. So it's quite a cross collaboration with them. And then we have access to, if we do have questions specific, that's something that we are not able to address, we want to go back to FDA. We've reached out to people who are part of this project team, and also directly emailing the eData team, right? And as Atya said, it's not just about FDA, but also other regulatory agency. We have people who really care about the China FDA. We have people who who submit question about the PMDA and other agency out in the world. So we as subject matter expert, we come together and discuss these questions and provide responses. Some of the questions we may not provide response because that may be very specific, may not be as frequently asked, right? And so we will go back to the submitter and we gently decline to answer those questions. But I think before we close, I want to put a disclaimer. Of course, as I said, it's not an avenue to obtain consultation. It's not something that you come in. It's not a free consulting. At the same time, we all are, sort of here to help each other out. And as Atya said, it's really a great collaboration. And then we always say, look, even if we have the responses vetted out among the subject matter expert in our team, but it's always best to check with your regulatory agencies, right? Because that's something that is always important. You have to communicate, you have to ask the question to them for your specific submission. Okay. And with that, I'm done. Atya, do you want to have anything you want to say, mention before we
No, I think we've covered just about everything. But again, just to sort of add a little promo in here, please help us, bring forth your questions, and also your talent and your expertise and your skills. Join our team so that we can have a more collaborative and more robust discussion.
Excellent. And to join our team, the best person to reach out to is Wendy, right? And so her email is here. If you don't know her already. All right. So that's it from our end, Bernard.
Fabulous. Thanks, y'all. Okay, and I'm going to take control myself now so we can take a look at the questions that came in. Assuming GoToWebinar wants to behave. It has been difficult this morning. Well, okay, so great. So we didn't get too many questions, but that actually works out perfectly because that gave y'all a little bit more time to go through your material. So if anyone has any questions, go ahead and submit them now. I've only got the couple that came in onto slides, but we can still chat them out if you've got more. So the first question, and I think Kit, this one goes to you because it came in as you were showing your slides, and they were asking, are all of the videos that you listed on the slide, topic 1, getting started with CDISC, free and available, and if so, where? And I think you are still muted, Kit. But
okay,
there
that
she
should
goes.
work. Can you hear? Okay, great. Yes, I was actually double muted, both my headset and GoToWebinar.
Covering all your bases.
That's right. Everything that is being produced for the primer is free, and it will be available to anybody and everybody who wants to see it. In terms of where, there will be, and you haven't found it yet because we haven't launched it, but my understanding is that there will be a link to it under the resources tab on the main homepage for the CDISC website. I don't know where the PHUSE website will put it, but there should be a similar link there as well. And so you should be able to get to it from either place. And as to the when, all I can say is soon.
Yeah. Sometime in the not too distant future.
That's correct.
Okay, great. And let's see here. Okay, so the next question, this one, and I know Bhavin, y'all kind of touched on this, but we love it when this question comes in because it's indicative of people wanting to get involved. They ask, how can I join the implementation FAQ project team?
Yeah, no, that's just simply emailing Wendy, I think, or any of us, from the project leadership here. But yeah, the best person is to via email to Wendy at phuse.eu. And the answer is yes, okay. Absolutely. It is open for everyone.
Fabulous. And I would assume they can probably find Wendy's email if they go to the PHUSE website, and then also we'll publish a PDF with all of the slides that were in this presentation, as well as a recording on the CDISC website. So you can go check those out there too.
Absolutely.
So, okay, we had a couple questions come in at the last second that I didn't get to put on the slides, but the first one is the SDTM IG 3.3 now available in a PDF format? And if not,
Yeah.
is there a plan to make it available in the future?
Stop right there.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
yes.
Yes, it is. It was just published a few days ago. If you go to the SDTM IG standards page, it is one of the files available for download. Remember earlier I showed a series of tabs across the top. So things are organized a little bit differently than you might be used to. So go ahead, and if you click on the versions tab, you should see it up there. And if it's not up there as a choice, click into SDTM IG 3.3 and it should give you the choice to download either way. Yes, and I want to send out kudos to the folks in the communications and publications teams in CDISC. Those who have never been involved in turning a complex document with many different orientations and links and pages. This thing's almost 400 pages long, almost. Actually, I think it's well over 400 pages now. That is a major undertaking. And that is why there had been hesitation to do it, because we're trying to put our resources onto publishing new standards and updates and COVID-related stuff. And but they did take the time to turn that into PDF, and so big shout out to them.
Yep, I have to echo that. Our comms team is amazing. I pester them on a fairly regular basis with things, so the work that they churn out is just amazing. Okay, and next question. So just to reiterate, because we've gotten a couple people ask, we will be providing a PDF of all of the slides that were used in this presentation, as well as a recording of the presentation on the CDISC website. Just go to the members only section and check out the webinar archive. You will be able to find it there. All right, so we had somebody ask, PoolDef is a relationship dataset domain, or I guess the question maybe is PoolDef a relationship dataset domain or a special purpose domain as given in the Send IG 3.0?
Sorry, haven't a clue.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with them. I mean, I know about SendDef, but it's definitely a Send thing, and I don't know if we have any Send folks on the call today, but I don't think any of the panelists are.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But you can, for questions like that, you can go to the CDISC website and navigate over to the Send section of the website. Oh, yeah.
And if I may, Bernard, just I'm not an expert in Send, but there's actually a Send implementation FAQ also on PHUSE. So there's a project team specifically to address questions on Send related stuff.
Ah, perfect. Okay, well then that's a good place to start. Okay, so next question that came in. Can we shift to CDISC standards without any SAS exposure or experience?
Yes. It's going to be more challenging for you because SAS is the sort of assumed language under the standards, and some of the constraints of the standards, such as the 8-character variable names, are a direct result of SAS version 5 constraints. But absolutely, I mean, you could implement CDISC standards using Excel. I'm not recommending that. Don't take that as a suggestion. But its intent is to be completely system agnostic, which is why the SDTM data sets are all modeled as flat files. So it doesn't assume SAS at all. In fact, we've had folks, especially in the academic world, who have used R instead.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you. And that rounds out all of the questions that we had, although I didn't realize Wendy was in the audience listening, so she just sent me some info saying from the PHUSE perspective, the CDISC primer deliverable, once it's final, will be housed at www.phuse.eu/white-papers. And I will take that link and I will add it into the slides so that you can see it in the PDF. And then, yeah, she also added that she added a link to the PHUSE Send wiki, which is long and complicated, so I won't read it out, but I will again add it into the slides so that you can take a look at it in the PDF. So, all right. Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much to our presenters, Atya and Beata and Bhavin and Kit and Rebecca, for all of the work that y'all did, you know, putting together all of the materials for this presentation, and then also just putting it into a presentation format. I know that that takes time and it's not easy, so we are very appreciative that you spent some of your time with us this morning, and we really enjoyed this presentation. So just a quick reminder again, we will post a PDF of the slides and a recording on the CDISC website, so you can access that all there. So now that we've gotten through with all of the questions, it doesn't look like anybody has sent in any more, but also thank you for the folks who are sending in saying thank you for the nice presentation. We appreciate that. It's good to get the real-time feedback. So in the little bit of time that we've got left, I think I can get through this and maybe give y'all a couple of extra minutes back into your day, reclaimed time. So in terms of our upcoming learning opportunities, we at CDISC have really, I think, not to toot our own horn, but done a really great job on pivoting from a model where we did a lot of face-to-face events and education over to kind of this new brave new COVID world where face-to-face meetings and things like that are not necessarily practical or safe for that matter. So we've been putting together some ways to learn that are virtual, remote, and so we put together we took some of our courses that were already existing in face-to-face format and turned them into what we call blended learning. And if anyone has taken a distance learning course in university or anything like that, it's very similar. Self-paced online training, so we've got modules that you can do at your own pace, but then for each section, there's a weekly Q&A with an instructor. And Kit is actually one of our instructors who was in our pilot round of these blended learning courses. And I feel like they've gone really well. So we're offering these in English, Japanese, and Mandarin, and in 4 global time zones, mainly North America, Europe, Japan, and China. And right now, because it's so brand new, there's an introductory offer of an additional 25% off. So if you're employed by a CDISC member organization, that means that you get an additional 20% off the discount that you already get based on either your gold or platinum membership. It is a pretty sweet deal. And the prices on these are lower also than our traditional face-to-face stuff. Just real quick, the 2 courses that we've got set right now, we are rapidly developing more, but we currently have our SDTM theory and application blended learning, and then CDISC implementation blended learning. Like I said, we just finished up with our first round of kind of public, open to the public cohorts. We're also doing several private trainings with these, which if you're interested, we can actually work directly with your organization to set up a blended learning cohort just for you. We've done that for several organizations so far, and they've all been going really well. So these are the dates for the next round of everything. I won't read through all those. You can see all that information. It's on the CDISC website. And then, yeah, it just is a good way if you want to, do something private for just your organization. It's a really good way to have some team bonding in these days where a lot of people are working from home, but also you can get a little bit more specific sometimes with your questions. I know with our private trainings, even with the face-to-face ones, we found that it was helpful to put a training together just with one organization, because that way they can talk about projects that they may be working on that maybe they're not ready to discuss publicly. So this is a really great opportunity. And if you're interested, you can go to our website, cdisc.org. You can email us at training@cdisc.org to find out more information and and then you can sign up for these on our learning management system that you can get to from the CDISC website. So on to webinars. Since you're here today, clearly you're into webinars. This is our upcoming webinar schedule. We've got more in the works, but these are the ones that we've got nailed down. The next one that's coming up next week is our Q3 control terminology updates. We do those once a quarter, and I think this one is a fairly sizable update, so that will be good. And then on the 14th of July, so we put together a QRS series that we're working on. We did a QRS office hours where the QRS team basically just kind of came in and said, hey, what are your questions? And people submitted them ahead of time. We took a lot of those questions and the things that people brought up and put together the series. So the first installment of the series is the updates, logically skipped items, eval, and more. So you can find a little bit more about that. There are descriptions, and you can sign up for these all on the CDISC website. Very easy. And then, yeah, on the 21st, we've got a combo of two kind of shorter topics. One is the C-ECRF project, and then CDISC standards for animal rule studies. Then later towards the end of July, Kit is actually doing this one, a lengthy title, but leveraging clinical research data standards in academia. What's in it for me? And then finally, our Q4 control terminology update is all the way up back in October. This was our a little bit more info on the QRS updates webinar. We'll go kind of over what to do with missing data for unknown reasons, checking all the deploy responses, and things like that. So we've got two of our QRS team co-leads on that. Then I wanted to point out, since it was kind of relevant to the beginning of the presentation with the primer info, we are working on taking some of our classroom courses and making them totally virtual. Different from the blended learning in that, the blended learning, you only have an hour of actual quote unquote face-to-face time with an instructor. These virtual courses are actually held entirely virtually. So CDISC for Newcomers, for example, is a 4-hour long course, and we're doing it entirely virtually. It's the same content that's in our face-to-face CDISC for Newcomers course. It's just delivered via webinar, via Zoom. So you can sign up for that on the CDISC website as well. Now, I think I just made it barely under time. So just again, wanted to thank Atya and Beata and Bhavin and Kit and Rebecca. Thank y'all so much for being here with us this morning / afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in. And we appreciate your time. And also thank you, audience, for joining us today. We'll have the PDF and the recording up on the CDISC website. And if you have any questions, if you came up with any questions at the last minute that you didn't get to submit, just feel free to email me at bclinky@cdisc.org, and we'll be happy to either try to answer them myself or forward them to people who know more than I do who can answer them better. So thank you again for joining us. Thanks to our presenters, and we will look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Until then, take care. Y'all stay safe, stay socially distanced, and wear your masks. All right, thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone.